Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the April session of the NOAC Chamber Focus Series. If you're not on mute, please go ahead and put on mute if you would. My name is Cindy Holzheimer. I'm the President and CEO of the Northern Ohio Area Chambers of Commerce, and we're really happy to have you with us today. Today, we not only have chamber professionals, but staff and board members from various nonprofits around the state, and we're super excited to have you with us. We also have folks from various school systems and city government joining us this morning. One in particular, I wanted to give a special shout out to the Honorable Mayor Patrick Ward from the city of Lyndhurst. Welcome.
I knew it. I could tell by the flag in the background.
There you go. All right. Let me get my little presentation thing going here. All right. I would like to recognize some of your peers very quickly. And that's the executive team that we have here at NOAC. So wave when I raise your hand. John Sobolewski, the board chair. Missy McWard, vice chair. Karen Tursick, vice chair. Tom Bennett, our treasurer. Our secretary. And then our at-large positions are Greg Church, Lori Reinbold, and Rachel Wincoop. So we're really excited, and thank you. The purpose of the Chamber Focus Series is to bring amazing speakers and topics to you, our chamber leaders and professionals. Today, I'm honored to be able to introduce our speaker, Bob Harris. There are more than 150,000 associations and chambers of commerce in the United States. It's kind of a mind-blowing stat to me. But Bob has worked with thousands of them over the last 30 years. He is on faculty at the U.S. Chamber, teaching at the Institute of Organizational Management, which is actually where I met Bob. His focus is strategy, sustainability, structure, and relevance. He's been called the Martha Stewart of association management. I can totally see that. Tips and templates that make governance and management so much easier. He believes that nonprofit organizations should be efficient and effective as any commercial business or franchise, meaning we should be running our nonprofits like a for-profit business. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Bob Harris.
Cindy, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Nice to be here. Nice to see everyone. I knew right away that the flag in the background meant that we had the mayor with us. What an honor that is. And the school board members too, those who were elected or those who are serving, thank you for your being on the call. All the chamber volunteers, thank you. You are making better communities. We have 7,200 chambers in the United States. And sometimes you think about, well, I'm on the board, I'm a volunteer, and we have to get the newsletter out, and we're gonna put on an event. But I look at it much bigger than that. I look at it as you're making better communities. Imagine the community without the chamber. You are having an impact on jobs, one of the most important things in America right now, the impact on jobs. You're having an impact on the economy. You're having an impact on the prosperity of business and success of business. That is a tremendous honor to serve on a chamber board, to have influences well beyond getting the newsletter out, but actually jobs, economy, community, standards of excellence, prosperity of business, business confidence. So I get to work with organizations around the world. For many of you, I know that you got on the board because someone told you you wouldn't have to do anything when you get on the board of directors. That's the #1 lie on a chamber nominating committee. Or Cindy, you and I both know someone goes to the bathroom and they come back into the boardroom and they go, guess what? We've just made you an officer. So there are responsibilities with it. Very often when I'm talking to board, they see themselves as volunteers, and you are, and I appreciate your service. I'm sure some of you serve on 2 or 3 or 4 other boards. But when I say you're on a board and you're a trustee of the corporation, they may say to me, oh, you don't understand. I'm not a trustee. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a volunteer. But to all the board members, you are the trustee of the corporation. Of course, the chamber is a corporation, and you are a trustee and a fiduciary, and we're going to talk about those today. Also want to talk to you about the strategic plan, better board meetings. What you should get out of today would be an affirmation that we're doing it all right. That is super. That's what I'd like you to have. Or you may get some new resources, and I'll share some resources There are some QR codes in the slides too. If you aim your camera at the QR code, you should be able to download the file. Or I'm going to make sure that you get a copy of the PowerPoint so that if there's anything, a strategic plan that you like, whatever it is, that you'll have that. So you should have an affirmation, you should get new resources, and you might have a to-do list. If you're sitting next to your chamber president, the executive director, I'm sure some of you would be whispering in the ear going, do we do that? Do we have that? So I look forward to working with you. The PowerPoint I'll share, I'm going to get into the PowerPoint now. You also are welcome to knock on the glass and ask a question at any point. Betty, if there's something that you just go, oh, we need to delve into that a bit more, that's perfectly fine. So I'm glad to be here. What an honor it is. I like working in my own time zone, which is very, very seldom. Let's see. So we'll talk about better boards, meetings, the challenges you have. What's a rump session? What's a squirrel at the board table? Your board members are quickly distracted by bright, shiny objects, and the squirrel will go up a tree, out the branch, back down the tree, and into a rabbit hole. And then I would look at you and go, are you talking about your strategic mission statement, or are you just distracted by what someone said at the meeting? Talk about committee management, risk awareness, making sure that you're aware of any potential risks and strategic plans. More about me, I am a certified association executive, 155,000 associations in the USA, so we have an association of associations. And my favorite associations are the Chocolate Association. When the board meets, they all bring the best products with them and want to share it and do taste testing. The State Department, USAID sends me to countries that don't have what we have. And what you're doing when you're at the board table at the chamber, you're exercising your rights in the Constitution. We have freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, and the right to petition government, the right to lobby or to visit City Hall. Most countries, many countries do not have that. Some of the countries that I've worked with, I've seen coups or attempted coups in the last 90 days. So it's an honor to go and spread the word of a chamber to business associations in Uzbekistan or Dubai or wherever it is. Everything on my website is free, nonprofitcenter.com. If you were to be in your professional society, another organization, many of you serve on the food bank or youth or battered women, other nonprofits in the community. And I think all of you know there's 74,000 nonprofits in Ohio, 74,000 nonprofits. They all have a board of directors. So when I talk to boards, I also use the theme from Apollo 13 50 years ago. Failure is not an option. So you're on the board. That was a decision that was made that you accepted. You have trustee responsibilities. You want to make sure there's no diversions, nothing's upset in the organization. So failure is not an option when you're on the board. You're prepared and you are there as a trustee making decisions on behalf of the members. The second most famous statement that came out of Apollo 13 was, Houston, we have a problem. And I see that on boards all the time. It might be a meltdown, lack of quorums, posting on social media what should not have been said. So we'll talk about those things. So here's the number. Ohio, 74,091 nonprofits, 7,000 chambers in the USA, but in Ohio alone, 74,000. Now I know to the chamber presidents, I know that your board members, they all serve on one or two other boards in their community. So they're all working hard to make a better community. What's common to all nonprofits are these three things at the bottom of the slide. They all have a board of directors required by law. But it might be interesting for you to know that the average board is 15. So the IRS says you should have a board where you can have a meaningful conversation. I know that the larger the board, the more disengaged board members become. You could have 25 or 30 on the board and people start not showing up because they don't feel engaged or they feel like no one will notice that they're not there. 15 is a good number. Maybe your board size is 11, maybe it's 17, maybe it's 20. You decide what works best for you. I work with groups like the US Tennis Association or ADA Dental. They meet 3 times a year. Most boards in America meet 4 times a year. They meet quarterly. That's what they need. They design an agenda that will last for 90 days. They meet, they use the best use of their time for the staff and the board members. And it's every 90 days. And what they do is they delegate authority to the executive committee so that if there's a need to handle an issue, the executive committee can do that. When you meet monthly, you're using up 200 hours of the staff time, preparing, attending, wrapping up. That's a lot. And it's an odd relationship that the more, the smaller the organization, the more often they meet. And then I'll say to you why. And a lot of boards will go, well, we've always done it that way. You decide what works best for you. That's something I like to come out of this session. Is the board the right size? Do you meet? Do you want to give authority to the executive committee? Do you need to meet every other month, 6 times a year, whatever it is? And then the last thing that's common to all 74,000 nonprofits in Ohio. So they're board, they have a board, they have meetings, and they have a mission statement. And the mission is to do something good for the community, to have public benefit. And in return, the Internal Revenue Service that oversees you has said that we will allow you to be exempt from paying federal income tax. I think we're the only country in the globe that has that standard, and that's why we have 1.5 million, is that you're doing something for the benefit of your community. And that's important. When you're at a board table, you're not there for yourself. You are there to advance the mission and do something positive for the community. This is one of the books that Cindy was kind enough to send out. I did it this year. It is 20 pages. You can use it with anything from Boy Scouts to Girl Scouts to Boys Club to any other nonprofit. 20 pages. It covers everything that I'm talking about today. I won't go through it page by page, but if you need to refresh and go back to what are the values of the board, what are fiduciary duties, what's the strategic plan look like, you'll find all of that in there.
We have one question.
Okay.
I figured before we get too far in, is there an optimum number of board members when setting up a new board?
I'm still gonna stick with probably 9 to 15. You know, I want a size where we can be nimble, we can meet, it's easy to meet, especially during the pandemic. It's hard to get everyone on the phone. So if I had 7 to 9 to 11 for a brand new board, and eventually probably aim towards 15 to make sure we have diversity on the board, we have the right committed board members on the board. When you start saying, let's add another seat and another seat and another seat, then you get to 20 or 25, and it's not really the best board. It's hard to have a meeting when people are missing and not everyone is fully engaged. So when you're asked to serve on a board, I know what happens. Your face gets a little bit red. Your heart beats a little bit faster. You look at the ground and you go, this is going to look good on my resume. This is going to be good for my company. But it's not about that. What you have to ask is, how often do you meet? What's your mission statement? Do I agree with your mission statement? So everyone on the nominating committee, everyone on the board should be able to recite the mission statement. Are there any risks or liability with serving on a board? Of course, I've said that the chamber is a corporation. Anyone could sue a corporation for copyright violations, harassment, discrimination. So yes, there is risk with serving on a board. So here's some of the ways that we protect the board. And I think all of you probably have these 4 protections, but it's up to you to check that out. Cindy, you said I look like Martha Stewart. I'm not sure I really appreciated that one.
I didn't say that you look like her. I can see that why you would be called that. Oh, I apologize.
So the Martha Stewart thing comes from, I'm trying to give you as many tips and templates that will make your organization healthy. So when you do an orientation or you invite someone to serve on the board or you join a board, you want to ask these questions. Do you offer D&O insurance? So here's my Martha Stewart tip. Make a copy of the front page of the D&O policy. Directors and officers will cover the board of directors if there's a lawsuit. We can hire a lawyer. Make a copy of the front page and pass it around the board table once a year to say, in return for good governance, we have insured you for a minimum of $1 million, maybe more. So D&O insurance, I would be cautious about getting yourself on a board and they don't offer you D&O. Even if it's youth soccer or whatever it is, there's always a possibility. So check that out before you say yes. You're incorporated. And I checked with this Secretary of State in Ohio to make sure that you are incorporated. So you are incorporated. So there's a corporate bail. I can't go after you as individual board members if I'm upset with the chamber. You may or may not have indemnification. You have to read the bylaws. Indemnification means that if a board member felt like they needed to hire an attorney because of decisions that were made at the board table, that they could submit their legal expenses and the board would consider reimbursing their legal expenses. So some of you may have indemnification towards the end of your bylaws and some of you may not. So it's up to you to know that. And then the state of Ohio gives you volunteer immunity. So as long as you're working within the governing documents, you have volunteer immunity. Now, if you decide to put on a big festival and you're selling Jell-O shots with vodka to raise money for the foundation, that's not in your governing documents or your bylaws, so you wouldn't have volunteer immunity. But if you've read the governing documents, the bylaws, the articles, then you have volunteer immunity in serving on the board of directors. So the 4 ways I want everyone you ask to join the board to let them know that we will protect you as board members. Going back just a bit, this is a board I worked with in Montgomery, Alabama. Size does matter. It was so amazing because when you went into the boardroom, it was just like TSA. You had to show an ID and they would give you your packet if you showed your ID to get into the room and you were the right person. So as I said, the average size board is 15. Most boards meet quarterly, sometimes every other month. If you're scared to give up monthly meetings, just try it. You can always go back, but I want to protect the time of the volunteers and protect the time of the staff. Know your organization structure. Some of you have a foundation. Karen, do you have a foundation? Where's that button? So
I do. I have a foundation. Okay. We have a foundation.
Okay. And so, you know, during the pandemic, I've talked to a lot of groups about, can we expand the purpose of the foundation? A lot of times the foundation says we're here for scholarship. Could we expand it to people with food insecurity, housing insecurity? So if you needed to expand the foundation or even use some of the dollars that are sitting in the foundation, probably now more than ever is important to use the foundation appropriately. So the chamber is a 501c6, the foundation is a 501c3. The reason to have both of those is if I want a grant or I want to collect money that is a charitable deduction, the money goes to the foundation. If any money going to the chamber, it's a business expense, so there is a difference. It's possible you could have a political action committee. It's also possible that you could have a for-profit. For example, the Realtors Association might have the MLS under them as a for-profit. So know the structure of the organization you're getting on, and you have to ask and discuss it, and that's part of board orientation. Here's your authority to govern at the board table. You get it from the state, and there's a copy of the Frank LaRose, Ohio Secretary of State. You can go there and make sure that your chamber is incorporated or any other organization is incorporated. There's the original documents, but remember I said you have volunteer immunity and you have a corporate bail. You want to make sure the organization you join is incorporated. You also have IRS exemption or authority. So you get authority from the state and from the IRS. Board members often don't think about that and they go, yeah, the members voted for me. But you actually have authority to govern the corporation from the state of Ohio. And you have authority to be exempt and be a fiduciary from the national government as a 501c6 and or 501c3. So here's the 501c3. This was the Illinois Agriculture Association, better known as the Farm Bureau. And I just pulled their tax return to show to you. You can see in the top right, open to the public. So to board members, if anyone says, oh, you're on the chamber board, could I have a copy of the tax return? There's only one answer. I'll be glad to get that for you. It is a public record and anyone is the key there So whether I call from Tallahassee, Florida, where I'm at, or I'm a disgruntled member and I said, I want to see the tax return, there's only one answer, is I'd be glad to get that for you. So for as a board member, the best thing to do is just to know, hey, it's a public record. And if the newspaper, the city council, whatever says we'd like to see it, we can find it at irs.gov. We can also find it at guidestar.org. All 1.5 million tax returns are right there. Or you can direct that person to the chamber office and the staff will take care of it. The staff has until the end of the day, if someone knocks on the door and says, I'd like to have the tax return. As a board member, you have 30 days before a fine starts growing. So I can tell a couple of things here. Most of you are 501c6, it tells me that, or you could be a 501c3. I know your mission statement. And then I can tell little things. This was an interesting one. They have $19 million from unrelated business income tax. So if you're a chamber executive, you're going, oh my gosh, what is it that they're doing? So their budget must be dramatically large. So the other thing on page 5 of the tax return, and the tax return is about 25 pages. So these are policies that apply to the board. So you have a policy manual or a compendium of policies or leadership policies. A couple of things that the IRS is asking nowadays, and this is new in the last 11 years. Has everyone on the board seen the tax return before you send it to the IRS? And you want to be able to answer yes. The board doesn't approve it. You just want to make sure we put it on the table one time, or we send out a note to say, hey, the 990 is available. I'd like you all to have a chance to see it before we send it to Washington. And then it goes on to say, did you have a conflict of interest policy? And it says in 12B, do you disclose it annually? So you need to do an orientation annually so that you can actually talk about what are conflicts of interest, and then pass out something that says, do you have any conflicts? Would you please disclose that? And then to the chamber chairs, I want to suggest that you do this on 12C. Does the organization regularly and consistently monitor conflicts of interest? I think the best way to do that is to simply ask at the start of the meeting, does anyone have a conflict with anything on today's agenda? And let the minutes reflect that the chair asked, there were no conflicts, and the meeting proceeded at 9 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is. But you want to be able to respond to the IRS agent, how do you regularly and consistently monitor conflicts of interest? There's another question that's the newest question on the tax return. Were there any diversions? So to board members, when the treasurer presents the financial statement, what usually happens is a board member raises their hand and says, what's this line item for $75? It says memorial service flowers. And you'll talk about, do we have a policy on memorials? Who decided to send the flowers? What if it's a past president? Should we send larger bouquets to the funeral? And then I'll talk to that board, and this is a true Ohio story. I'll talk to that board and say, what was the size of the financial statement that you just discussed for 30 minutes? And I've had everyone on the board go, I don't know, but they knew what the $75 was. So look at the big picture. To board members, stay pretty high up there. What I'd like you to do is combine the annual income with the assets reported on the tax return, put those together, and then I know the size of your organization. And you're using those resources or protecting those resources. So if you're a chamber and your budget is $200,000 and you have $200,000 in the bank, then you're a $400,000 organization. Or you own an office building or whatever it is. Some of you exceed $1 million easily. And then at the bottom of this slide, how do you make sure that Form 990 is available to the public? So just that's, I wasn't lying about that. Anyone at all can say, I'd like to have a copy of the tax return. That really comes about because of what happened with We Build the Wall a few months ago. The Boy Scouts of America, the Rifle Association, Wounded Warriors. And if they were not spending the money appropriately, so the public has a right to see how you're spending your money on the same form as the board members' names. So there's more scrutiny on serving on a board than ever before, which is a good thing. We want you to focus on the mission statement and serving the community. Directors' roles, you wear a lot of different hats. I've already said it. You're a trustee of the corporation, and you are a fiduciary on behalf of the members. And there's a great little book called Your Director Hat. I think that's what that says. And it's by a friend of mine in Colorado Springs. His last name is Zadel, Z-A-D-E-L. I think it's $10, but what a great tool to give to the officers or to the board. You know, you have authority from gavel to gavel. You are a board member when the board meeting convenes, and then we adjourn. After that, you don't have authority to speak for the organization, but you will be a sounding board. We need you to listen to members and let us know what's going on in the community. You will be a strategist. We need you to help with solutions. Members want resolutions when they call the chambers. And we want you to be a thought leader, that you are a visionary. So visionary to me is 50,000 foot. The altimeter is the board is always at 50,000 foot. Committees are 25,000 foot. I don't know if I have that. There, board is at 50,000 foot. That's the altimeter. When you get below that, I empower everyone on the call to say, hey, I believe that we're in the weeds now. So there's the sign, we're in the weeds. All you have to do is just have this in front of the chair and just move it a little bit. And the board members start going, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take us into the weeds. But your job is to advance the mission and the goals of the strategic plan, not necessarily to decide what color the conference room should be painted, or should we replace the computers. Those are budgetary items. The committees work for the board. They supplement the work of the board of directors, 25,000 foot. The staff is the management that carries out all the work of the committees and the board of directors. Their administration and management is at 10,000 foot. So to the chairs, keep your board as high as possible. Go back to my starting comments. You're in it for the jobs, for the prosperity, for the economy, for the community. Not what color is the wall in the conference room. Here's the documents here's the fiduciary duties that I spoke to you as a fiduciary. Duty of care, loyalty, and obedience. Now this would be and some of you may use the guide that I have on board orientation. It's also in the leadership manual that I gave to you. Everyone on your board should understand care, loyalty, and obedience. You are a fiduciary on behalf of the members. Duty of care. You're careful with the decisions at the board table. So I remember when the American Medical Association, someone said, I think we ought to endorse this. They didn't do any homework. They didn't say, is it the best thing out there? How do we know that the members want us to do endorsements? But it passed anyway at that meeting. No one asked the right questions, that we're not careful. 90 days later, they reconvened, they rescinded the endorsement. They were sued for $40 million and they lost. They settled for $9.9 million. So duty of care is you come to the meetings prepared, you've read the information, you're fully aware of what the issues are, what our resources are, what's in our strategic plan. Duty of care. Loyalty. You're loyal to the organization, not to yourself, but to the organization, the mission statement. And duty of obedience. It means when the executive director calls you and says they need something, you act immediately. That's not true. It means obedient to the governing documents. So then you have to ask, well, what are the governing documents? Here they are. So when I join a board, I want to make sure that I've received the information I need to read. If I don't receive it, a lot of board members will say, well, I just won't say anything for 6 months. But as soon as they're installed and that meeting is held, they have authority in the board to be a good board member. So we have to do an orientation. Orientation is once a year. You can call it refresh and blend. 90 minutes. I want you to put it into your meeting minutes that you did an orientation to protect the board and the organization. Who was there? Did you tell them about conflicts? Did you share 990 with them, etc.? So here's the hierarchy. These are the governing documents from top to bottom. The mission statement. It's submitted to the IRS every year. I work with the Florida Medical Association. It's in bronze outside of their building. Should be everywhere. Put it at the top or bottom of the agenda. Put it on the conference room wall. Articles of incorporation. I showed you that the Secretary of State gives you authority as a corporation. Bylaws, that's your relationship to the members. You have to read them. Do you have an audit or do you have indemnification? Who appoints the committees? That's all explained in the bylaws. And if you don't follow them, the bylaws have the right to enforce the members have the right to enforce the bylaws by taking the board to court. Policies are the wisdom of the board of directors before you. So policies may be, we have an audit, we have an annual orientation, we don't violate antitrust laws. Those are policies that the board of directors before this year have adopted, that you follow those policies. Policies are your friend. You can rescind, amend, or adopt a policy at a board meeting. You don't have to go to the members to adopt a policy. So if I was on your board and I said, you know, I'd really like to have Starbucks coffee at every board meeting, that becomes a policy. That's up to you. Of course, that's a little bit lower than you should be thinking. Strategic plan is your roadmap. Here's a sample roadmap. This is a New York organization. That's their entire strategic plan. They have a mission, a vision, 4 goals, and 3 strategies per goal. So your strategic plan is not a wish list or a to-do list. It's a document to communicate value to your stakeholders. And then the annual budget is driven by this strategic plan. So the budget is 1 year. The strategic plan is usually 3 years. So more information on this, you can download the information. Here's a sample on policies. If you don't have a policy manual, this is the 25 most common policies that I've found. This is Cindy, I think you just sent it to everyone or you have available. Okay, good. So do an orientation. Make sure that you've got proof that you gave the board the governing documents. You could give it to them in a notebook. You could give it to them in a memory stick. You could put it in a shared site or Dropbox, but make sure the board members have those access to the governing documents I spoke about. Ask them to sign it or disclose any conflicts of interest. Explain apparent authority. They only have authority inside the board meeting, not afterwards. The chief elected person, the chair, speaks for the organization. Board members should not be posting to social media and saying, well, I'm on the chamber board, I can answer that. Oh yeah, I don't like that company, because everything you post looks like you're speaking for the chamber, and apparent authority is a legal concept that it says if it appears you're speaking for the chamber, the public has a right to sue the chamber. So be very careful, make sure your board members understand who speaks for the organization. That would be the chief elected officer, and they can delegate to anyone, they can delegate to the president, but no one on the board can usurp the authority of the president. You don't violate antitrust, which is when any 2 people in the same business get together and start talking about prices. So let's just say you brought together all the construction industry and they're in a committee meeting and they start saying, are you going to bid on this city job? I am too. We ought to talk about that. Well, bid rigging, price fixing, boycotting are violations since the law was passed in 1890. And the fine is, if you've got a piece of paper, it's a lot of zeros, the fine is $10 million. So that's why we have D&O insurance. You don't want that to happen in a committee. You don't want it to happen in a hallway or at luncheon. Make sure that you document in the minutes you did an orientation and who was there, and then have them sign some sort of commitment form if you would. So here's a commitment form that I use. I like to keep it to 1 page. You probably want to add some text to it. But the 6 most important things are that they're signing. And this is so you can protect them, the board and the organization, that they've received the governing documents. Now, remember I said you have volunteer immunity if you've read the governing. So I want some proof that we gave you the governing documents. Number 2, that you will advance the mission. So you know what it is. It's not about you. It's about the mission of the organization. Number 3, that you respect confidentiality. So it's only fair that when we're in a meeting, we can expect that no one is on their phone texting their boss or someone else and saying, oh, guess what the chamber's talking about? What goes on inside the board meeting is treated with confidentiality. And remember, the chief elected officer is the spokesperson. So you don't leave a board meeting and then start a email chain saying, oh, guess what the chamber's doing? I really disagree with that. The only thing you do after a board meeting is support the decisions of the board. You speak up inside the meeting, but not after the meeting. You'll disclose conflicts of interest that might arise, and that's why I asked the chair to ask if there's any conflicts with today's agenda. You'll avoid antitrust violations, and you'll support the decisions of the board. So your altimeter, you're 50,000, but when you drop below that, you're in the weeds. Here's the most important statement. Cindy, any questions?
We actually do have a few. I wasn't sure where to weave some of them in.
Well, let me just finish this slide.
Okay.
This is a tattoo on my right bicep. It is the most important thing in a chamber or a nonprofit organization. The board will govern. They're strategic, they're visionary, they're very high up there. The staff will manage. And I explain that as implementing the decisions of the board. So those 4 words really are it. Greg, I know you got a copy of it. I carry a copy of it wherever I go. Cindy, you've got a copy of it. That's my legacy. Hey, let's go to some questions.
Okay, what are your thoughts on a mandatory financial commitment from board members?
I'm concerned about mandatory. I would like to get my board members based on competency and desire. Now, we always like to think they're bringing time, talent, and treasure. Some of the treasure could be in-kind services. Maybe they help us with a sponsorship, not them giving out of their pocket. I'm unlikely to say I'd like to join your board, but I could never give you $1,000. Cautious about that. I'll ask them for their time, their talent, and if they can help us sign up a member, close a deal, that's enough for me.
Okay.
I'm not sure I would have a policy that I want to ask every board member to be a leader and contributing. But if someone says, I'm just not there, we're coming out of a pandemic, I fully respect that.
I agree. What are your thoughts on term limits for boards?
My thoughts are really what ACCE and ASAE would say is that most organizations have 2 terms and then you come off the board. We want fresh ideas. We want young leaders. So most terms are 3 years. So you get on the board for 3 years. You might be elected for another 3 years, but then at that point, it's time to let someone else come forward. So maybe you're off for a year, or maybe you're dedicated, you want to come back, or maybe you want to move on to the foundation board. Maybe you want to be on the past president's council or past chair's council. There's a lot of ways to engage without having to take a seat. Then maybe we need to open up for other people. So 2-3-year terms is the normal, and then you come off the board. Yeah.
Okay. And these are all very unrelated questions, but they're really great. Is a quorum a majority of the total seated on the board or the total of what should be seated? Example, board is supposed to be 12, only has 10. Is the quorum then 7 or 6 people? Does that make sense?
We have to read the bylaws carefully. 90% of the time, it's the quorum is the majority of the governing body. The governing body is everyone who serves on that board. So if it's 12 people, I would expect seven people to be at the table. Now, you can still conduct business. You can continue to hold the meeting. You can discuss with the board and make recommendations for the next meeting. You don't have to adjourn. And then some of you may want to follow Robert's Rules of Order too. I admit that I use Bob's Rules of Order. I'm a little more casual than Robert's Rules of Order. Cindy.
All right, last one, and then we'll keep going. Should board members serve on a committee or 2? Kind of a scenario.
Here's my ideal. If you ask a board member to serve on the board, that's an important job already. If you say, I also need you to serve on a committee, now you're giving them double or triple work. So I'd really like a board member to be a liaison to a committee. I want to engage non-board members on the committee. I'd love to have future leaders coming on the committees. And then let the board member be liaison. A liaison is a champion for the committee. They are the person that goes to that committee meeting. They don't usurp the authority of the committee chair, but they're there to say, do you understand the charge? Do you need anything? Do you have the resources? And then they'll carry the message back to the board, especially if the committee chair can't come, and say, here's what that committee's doing. You need a link between the committees and the board of directors. So that's the ideal link is a board liaison and or a staff liaison. What about executive sessions? What do you think about those?
We only have an executive team, so we have 9 total.
Okay, so executive committee is usually the officers. If you have a small board, you may not need to hold an executive committee meeting. But an executive session is when you say, okay, Everyone out of the room. It's just going to be the board. We don't need the staff in here. Read my lips. Danger, danger, danger. I always want the staff there to protect me as a board member. If we're going to meet without staff, it's probably for one good reason, is that we're doing a CEO performance review. Or maybe it's a serious member grievance and we need to keep it in the room. But if the board says, okay, it's the end of the meeting, I'd just like to meet regularly with in executive session, no staff, everyone leave, because it's convenient and it feels good. That's also going to be a time where 3 or 4 years later, an attorney's going to say, is that when you all got together and decided to boycott the car dealer in the next county? And you go, no, we didn't say that. Well, do you have minutes? Well, no, we don't. Well, is there an agenda for the exec? No, there's not that. What was the staff? No, the staff wasn't in there. So it's danger to think it's okay to go to executive session. Usually one of 3 reasons: performance review, member grievance, or confidential contract. Mayor, I love watching your body language there. And you know, Mr. Mayor, you've got so many other laws you have to comply with. We call it government in the sunshine and open record laws.
But a lot of that transcends into board service as well. And in my other lives, my other board service, what I comport to here on this side of the equation does help, raise the level of what we do on the other side. So yes, meeting in executive session for specific reasons and a very limited number of reasons. And we always say why we're doing it.
Yes, for very limited. So here's what I would do, and you know it, Mr. Mayor, is that if the board says we're going to executive session, the president of the chamber or the organization is to say, well, give me the reason you're going into executive session. I'll make a note in the minutes. That's what you're doing to protect the chamber, the board, and yourself.
And no action is taken behind closed doors. The action is always taken after the executive session. Then we come out and take whatever action is necessary. If it's terminating somebody, it's terminating. We're not going to talk about someone, in the sunlight.
Yes.
We talk about them behind closed doors because that could be somewhat embarrassing to that person. But any action that is taken in the light of day.
Well said. That's a worthy article we should write together. Is that we want to be transparent. We'll be in executive session. We may make a recommendation, but the action comes after the executive session. Mr. Mayor, a lot of times I hear board members of chambers and other organizations say, well, I think our minutes are a public record because we're nonprofit. Nod your head or shake your head.
Well, I mean, ours are always.
Yours are
always public record. I'm not sure on nonprofits.
99% as I travel the country is no.
Yeah.
It's that the minutes are a document to protect the board of directors. They're not a newsletter for the members.
Mm-hmm.
Brief is better. And when I find a board member who says, oh yeah, I gave away the whole packet because I thought we had to comply with Freedom of Information Act. That applies to the government. Open record laws, that applies to the government. The chamber is a private corporation in Ohio.
And there should always be a solid custodian of those records, and that person is charged with making those determinations, not individual members.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate your hospitality here. Cindy?
Hey, so one quick question, since you were talking about minutes, how, and I know you just skimmed over it, how brief should the minutes be? This person brought motion, seconded, how, we have some that are books and then some that are too brief. So what's a happy?
Cindy, brief is better. So okay. If everyone just takes that into heart, and I think almost anything in a volunteer organization, the strategic plan could fit on a business card. The minutes could fit on one page. We had a quorum. We did our due duty. We asked if there were conflicts of interest. That's indicated in the minutes. And then there were some motions made, and it will indicate how the motions were handled, whether they passed or amended or withdrawn or killed. And then I want to have the starting time and ending time. A lot of boards will forget the ending time. So it looks like you were in session for 8 hours when in reality you were in session for 40 minutes. So always have the end time. Keep minutes perpetually. It's a good question, forever and ever. Then with the minutes, I don't need to identify who made the motion or seconded. The motion belongs to the board of directors. So if I say I'd like to make a motion and we're going to hold the meeting at the hotel, and then someone slips and fall at the front door of the hotel and they sue the organization, who's going to be the first person subpoenaed? Is me, because I made the motion. So, and then the court's going to say, well, did you visit the hotel? Are you a specialist in hotels? So the reality is I want to say that a motion was made and seconded. I do not need to identify who made the motion or who seconded it. Steve Petty, what are you thinking? I'm reading.
I'm sending a chat here.
Cindy, so I don't attach anything to the minutes. I don't say the membership report is attached to the government affairs. I don't want to have any attachments. I want the minutes to stand on their own. I do not post them on the chamber website. Isn't that nice that you want but the minutes are a document to protect the board of directors. There's other ways to tell the membership what the chamber is doing without posting the minutes. Because there are some things like a contract or a renewal or staff discussions. I do not have a tape recording of the minutes. Cindy, as we meet by Zoom, and we are tape recording those meetings as board meetings, I think that we also have to make sure that we destroy that tape, that digital copy, as soon as we approve the minutes. So once a motion was made to approve the minutes that are in writing, then I want to destroy the old tapes. Mr. Mayor, not you. And school boards, not you. I think that answered the questions on minutes. Who should take the minutes? The best person should take the minutes. So if you got an elected secretary, and they say, I'll do it, and they do a really bad job, the motions are wrong, then I would say, look, we'll find someone on staff to do it. So I'd love for the elected secretary to do it, but you may have to provide them a template or some guidance so that they're not putting everything into the minutes.
Do you put new business discussions documented in minutes?
It's not necessarily a motion, but I might say the board was exploring the purchase of an office building. We didn't take an action, but I do want some history that the topic came up. But I don't want to say, oh, what contractor should we use? Or we decided we don't want to move to the city lot downtown, or no. I just want a very brief, this is when the conversation started. That's how it came about. Okay, good question. Tom Bolus, have you learned something yet? You look like you're in a law library.
I am, yes, I have learned some things. I'm going to make some notes. I serve on several boards, so I'm going to make some notes, and I'm the board chair of one. So we're going to make some changes to our agendas. I like the idea of putting the question about conflicts with anything on the agenda at the beginning. I like that a lot. One thing I will point out, being that I am an attorney and I serve on a lot of boards, I've always been told at various law seminars that you need to make it clear to your board that I'm participating as a board trustee who has a knowledge of the law, but I am not your attorney.
Yes.
And cannot serve in that role. And I'm always a big fan for having formally recognized legal counsel on retainer if necessary, but identifying that, because the first thing that happens is everyone looks to the lawyer on the board and says,
hey,
what
Tom,
do you think?
Yeah. So Tom, the same thing happens with the CPA. Oh, we have
Exactly.
a CPA on you could do our taxes, but that's a whole different role, and there's ethics that you're following. Tom, thanks for sharing that.
Tom actually sits on my board, and I quite often have to preface emails with, if this doesn't fit in the scope of questions you can answer, please tell me and I'll go to somebody else.
Good. I'm gonna go back to Tom. I'm gonna share an agenda with you, with everybody. Trying. Here is, Tom, here's an agenda. So I always say to the board officers or the chair, you design an agenda that works for you. So there's at the bottom some of the reminders as footnotes, just 6-point type or 4-point type. Please disclose conflicts of interest. Please avoid antitrust violations. And then the top is the welcome and the chair making the right statements at the start of the meeting. And let's put that in the meeting minutes that the chair opened it with those statements. And then you approve the minutes. I like the minutes to be on the agenda, not in the consent agenda. You accept the financial report. You do not approve the financial report. You accept the financial report. You accept the consent agenda. The consent agenda are all the reports that committee reports, staff reports, officer reports that are not controversial, that they don't require action. They're information only. Now, I find a lot of chambers have up to 17 committee reports on their agenda. That's taking up really valuable governance time. Those reports could have been read in advance. So I like the use of a consent agenda. Here's an example of one where the organization sends out their meeting notice with the agenda, and the reports that they have to read are hyperlinked to the agenda. So it makes it so much easier. It's not a lot of files to open it up. You can simply say, we have a meeting in 10 days. Here's what's going to be on the agenda and the hyperlinked reports you need to read in advance. Then you go back to at the meeting, someone simply says, I'd like to make a motion, we accept those reports. If something's controversial, you can take it off the consent agenda. But otherwise, you just gotten rid of those 17 reports in one motion, and then we can get to what's most important. So you can see I've woven in the goals from the strategic plan right on the agenda. That's what the chamber board should be talking about. That's good governance. Tom?
Question for you, Bob. I've been on some other boards that try to move approval of the minutes and the financial reports all to the consent agenda. And I've always pushed back against that because I want us to actually approve the minutes, and I want us to actually look at the financial reports in the context of the board meeting itself. And you know, some guidance of what's appropriate to be in consent agendas and what isn't. I scanned your link, hope they're going to have it there, but you know, that's something that I think a lot of people have different viewpoints on what is consent agenda and what isn't.
My fear is the same as you. If I put the financial statement in the minutes inside the consent agenda, what if it's approved and the board members didn't read it? So I want to have in the minutes that was held out. So I agree with you 100%. The goals from the strategic plan are right on the agenda. That's what I want the board to talk about. I've taken off new business. The worst time for new business is when everyone's looking at their watch. We're almost at the end of the meeting and you go, hey, is there any new business? So what I always say when I send out the meeting notice, here's the consent agenda, please read these. And if anybody has any new business, please bring it to the attention of the executive director or the chair of the board, so that we've got a way to place that new business in the right spot, or to hold it out or put it in the parking lot, instead of having 3 people at the end of the meeting saying, I've got some ideas. So I'm cautious with that. And you see the mission statement is always on the agenda, top or bottom.
I have a question about the meeting
Betty?
agenda. With the consent agenda, does the executive director write their own consent agenda, and then the board chair has their own consent agenda, or is it just one consent agenda?
One
With all
consent
the-
agenda. So everything that's, so Betty, I know that you're doing a report, maybe your chair is doing one, maybe the membership committee is doing one.
Mhm.
Information only. Those 3 reports would be sent out with a meeting notice. And then at the start of the meeting, someone would be able to say, I make a motion, we accept those. We all had a chance to read it. They're fiduciary.
Oh,
You know, they've all read it.
thank you.
Yes. I do want to, just on meetings, this is the squirrel is, I always carry it at the board table. It's available at Amazon. Board members will be distracted. And, you know, if you've got a squirrel at the table, maybe they won't be as distracted. I'm always careful and I listen closely for the board member who frequently says, I just have a question. It's possible that they didn't read the consent agenda. And what happens to the chairs when someone says, I just have a question, 2 other board members usually say, oh, I know the answer. and you've lost control of the agenda and you're going down another path. Watch out for the board member who starts all the sentences with, I hate to be this devil's advocate. If that's a common phrase for that person, simply take them to the side later on and say, look, we're not looking for the devil's advocate. We're looking for solutions and resolutions. And there's my sign that we should be at 50,000 feet and not into the weeds. I watch out for board members who don't really listen to the motion and they don't know what they're voting on because they were on their phone or just not attuned. Remember duty of care. So lazy motions are not asking that we restate the motion. It's important to restate it and to get it correct. We've talked about executive sessions. I'm cautious about abstentions. The only time I expect to see an abstention in the minutes is if there was a conflict of interest declared. I don't expect a board member to go, well, I don't really agree with that. Just put me down as abstaining. You're a trustee. You have an expectation to vote when you're at the meeting. And I'm cautious about rump sessions. That's when a couple of board members decide to get together before the board meeting, and they might decide how to vote before they even have the information. Whether you have lunch with another board member or you're calling a couple of board members and saying, hey, what do you think about what's on the agenda? I want everyone to come fresh to the meeting and hear the same information and not decide how they're going to vote as a block in advance of the meeting. If you have questions, the best person to answer them is the executive director and the chair of the board. That's where your questions should go, not to other board members. Finances, make sure that you've got systems in place. I've already said, make sure you know what the assets are. Make sure you know what the income is. It's your budget. It belongs to you, not to the staff. Financial statements, make sure that you're accepting, not approving. Respect the role of the treasurer. Recognize that you're going to see Form 990 before it's sent to the IRS. Learn how to read Form 990. You could do that after this call. Know what your audit process is. Do you have an audit? Is it every year? Is it every 3 years? Is it every 5 years? Is it a review? Is it a compilation? But that's up to you to know what your policy is, and the IRS asks that. And then I always like you to know the ratio between dues and non-dues. So dues usually is 50% of the budget. Non-dues is also the other 50%. Now look at your budget, create a pie chart. Maybe it's 40-60, maybe it's 30-70. You decide what you're comfortable with as dues to non-dues. But my comfort level is I'd like to think that you have 50% of your income that comes in from dues, 50% comes in from events, education, advertising, sales, grants, whatever it is. So know what your ratio is of dues to non-dues. Cindy, did that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does make sense. I do have
Okay.
a quick question that it kind of maybe tie into this a little bit. So someone is asking about finance committee reports, especially ones that have decisions around creating new positions. Is that something that should be voted on by the board? Should the committee be calling out more explicitly, or is that really an executive director decision?
Cindy, at my first glance of that, if I heard it right, I feel like the finance committee might have gone beyond their scope.
Mm-hmm.
The finance committee is overseeing and protecting, and to come back and say, okay, we've approved a new position, that seems like it's a board budget item, not a finance committee.
That makes sense.
I'd like to answer that offline.
Yeah, my understanding though is that, as far as the staff, that would then fall under the scope of the executive director.
Let's make that very clear. The executive director is hiring, using the funds and through the budget and the policies, but the finance committee is not interviewing or second guessing the hiring someone at all. The board is responsible for governance, not for personnel. I want to say it again. The board's not responsible for personnel. If a board member were to say, well, I just feel better if I had all the salaries of the staff, the chair needs to say, wait a minute, that's not our role whatsoever. We know our role is much higher than that. I do want to point out to all the board, and this is why we've got great executive directors. You see on non-dues advertising and sponsorship, advertising is taxable to your chamber. Sponsorship is not taxable. So I want to get the terminology right in the budget. and in what our motions might say. If you want a committee to sell sponsorships, don't let them create something that says we're gonna raise advertising dollars. Advertising is taxable, sponsorship is not taxable. And your executive directors know the answers to that. Risk awareness, everyone on the board is responsible for risk management. Any awareness of what could happen, a copyright violation, antitrust violations, to reduce it, to make sure it doesn't happen, to monitor and make sure we don't walk into something that could be risk. Maybe a committee's making decisions, they're talking about something in the committee, you would stop that, shut that down. Maybe you have a board member who's posting on social media, saying nasty things about a company, member or non-member, looks like they're speaking for the chamber. So you want to reduce or stop the risk. And then you have insurance, and you probably have general liability on the chamber or the organization, D&O on the board, a surety bond on the treasurer. And you may add to your general liability insurance, publisher's insurance, and cybercrime insurance, so that no one is in your computers as we speak stealing identities. The risks that I always look for in a nonprofit, we talked about antitrust. You wrote down the number of zeros after $10 million for a committee, an expo, two or three people deciding to collude on price fixing or bid rigging. Tom, I've been called before the court because of what my elected president wrote into the newsletter and said, we're worth a lot more, we need to raise our prices. Speaking authority, I've already talked about apparent authority, who speaks for the organization. Social media postings, I would hope that everyone has a policy on the board posting as a position on the board, being careful with that. Public records, I've indicated to you that the minutes are not a public record, but the IRS records are very public. So the minutes, the financial statements, the list of members are not a public record. Those are not given away. Be cautious with that. If embezzlement is the question I pointed out on the tax return. Were there any diversions in your organization? The IRS asks you that questions every year. So protect the dollars, know what's in your finances and assets. Copyright violations. I've seen a chamber in Texas. Someone said, here's an article for the newsletter. And then they said, here's a nice photo to go with it. They got it off the internet. The photo was used. It was put on their website. The owner of the photo trolled and found it and asked the chamber for $100,000. So don't violate copyright laws, and protect your own information. I like you to add the copyright symbol and protect your intellectual property as often as possible. Whistleblower, in case someone comes to the board and says, hey, there's something wrong. Cybercrime, we talked about. Photos. Here's an example of photo releases. Two different associations. So you're taking photos of people who come to the event. Have you given them any notice that you might use these photos to market next year's event? So just be cautious with that. Maybe it's in the registration program. Maybe it's a sign on the registration desk. Maybe it's a sign in your conference room that we might take your photo. And by doing that, we're going to use it unless you tell us not to. Filings, the chamber presidents take care of that. And member notices, there's two notices we have to give to the members once a year. One is that if we use a portion of your dues dollars for lobbying, direct lobbying expenses, we have to tell the members what that percentage is. You want to keep that record for the next 7 years in case you're audited. And secondly, that you have to tell the members that their dues are not deductible as a charitable deduction. They are deducted as a business expense. So that has to be on your dues renewal notice and on your membership application. So the chamber execs have gone to school for this. They constantly make sure that we're protecting the board, and they take care of the administrative side of this. Here's a sign-in sheet for committees if you need it. Antitrust, conflicts of interest, confidentiality, and your mission statement at the bottom of it. And I'm going to keep this for probably 7 years. And did you ever remind that committee not to talk about that, or did you advise them? Projects. I want to jump to strategic plans in just a minute. Committees. There's a guide to committees online. Almost all of my work is 2 pages because volunteers don't read past 2 pages because they're very, very busy people. Committees are an asset or a liability. I've shown you they could be a liability. They're an asset if they supplement the work of the board and the staff. The IRS asks if you're keeping minutes for your committees. So give your committees, and Cindy, I gave you a template. Make sure your committees all have a template to keep a set of minutes, because the IRS is asking, are they keeping minutes? All the committee work should be aligned with your strategic plan. So here's an example of that. Here's the strategic plan, California. So there's 5 goals in the strategic plan. And the plan has a board member who's a goal champion or a goal driver for each of the goals, which is just genius, is that board members can now say, well, yes, I'm responsible for one of the goal areas. And then the executive director turned it over and made sure that all the committees align with the goals. So you see this strategic plan's got the vision, the mission, the 5 goals, the board members who are the goal drivers, and the committees on the backside where the members can decide how to be involved in the organization. I love that. So let's talk about your strategic plan. And that's the last topic, Cindy. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I have a couple of questions that we'll get to after this.
Okay, we'll take the slides down. So strategic plan, I just showed you one. Every organization, it's the 4th most important document and the 5th most important document in the organization. It should communicate value to the stakeholders. What do you do for me? Why should I renew? Well, I've just gone through a pandemic. I want to know what the return on investment is for my dues. I want to see that the leadership's got a plan. So you're going to use the plan to communicate to the community. The plan will guide the next 3 years of boards. No chairman ever comes in and says, well, while I'm chair, here's what I want to focus on. The best thing a board member can do is say, where's the strategic plan? That's our job to advance it. The resources in the organization will be aligned with the goals, and the strategic plan empowers the staff to do their job. So here's some samples. And there's a guide for you too. If you want a guide to strategic planning, and Cindy, you also sent out something different, a toolkit on strategic planning. Here's the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. 4 goals in their strategic plan. Now this is a statewide chamber. I'm going to guess $20 million in assets and in revenue. Just 4 goals. So the plan is not a wish list by the board. You can do a plan in 4 to 5 hours on a Saturday morning on what is it, how we're going to use the resources to communicate to our stakeholders that this is what we're going to do. And for the executives, the graphics come from a website called Noun Project. There are thousands and thousands of similar graphics that you can use because board members or members don't have time to read anymore. So use the graphics. So powerful advocacy, business solutions. Why should I join? Because we offer you business solutions. The environment of economic growth, and being a world-class chamber. So 3 of those goals are deliver value to the community, and one of them is to make sure we have a world-class chamber. Maybe it's accredited, that maybe it's gotten the Ohio Award of Performance Excellence. Here's another, this is the beef industry. I always have dinner with the group the night before. I think there were 20 on the board. When the entrees came after we ordered, I noticed that all the board members had ordered beef and I was the only one who ordered fish. So it was a big mistake. But that's their plan. You can see they use the graphics again. There's 6 goals in the plan. If you have more than 6 goals, you're just putting together to-do lists and you're in the weeds. Tell me what your 6 things, and I'm going to guess it's advocacy. It's membership value. Let's do this together. Number 1, advocacy and representing the interests of business. Number 2, community service and community relations and collaboration. Number 3, education, professional development, training, and resources. Number 4, public awareness, marketing, events. Number 5, maintaining a dynamic chamber of commerce. So typical 4 or 5. Here's the Columbus AIA, their strategic plan. There's the 6 goals. Now, what a good idea to put it on a pop-up banner. So you can take that to any meeting. At the registration desk, there's the strategic plan. So their mission statement is at the top. There's 6 goals. Committees, so we know members see it and they know how they can be involved in the organization, and their board of directors. So the plan, I wrote a book recently last year, maybe 2 years ago, that the plan should not be on the shelf collecting dust. You can use it as a wallet card. You can use it as a door hanger at your conference. Sorry, Tom. So this is a plan, the Erosion Control Association. There's their 4 goals. You see the graphics used again, their mission and vision. And that's what I want the board, when someone says, the mayor says to you, tell me about your organization. Every board member should be able to say, well, the mission is, we're here to represent the interests of business and improve our community through the economy. And our goals are to advocate, to deliver value, to enhance the community. So board members should be able to recite the mission and goals. This is the largest employer in Colorado. It's the Restaurant Association. There's their 5 goals on a business card. So for about $40, you could get 500 cards. The next time you're at a luncheon with your members, or all the board members have a card, have the card, multiple cards to give out when they're signing up a new member, when they're visiting a sponsor. So it's okay to cheat and put it on a business card and say, here's our goals and our mission. Here's one I showed to you earlier. So 25 million at least. There's their mission and vision. Remember, to everyone, the mission statement is required by law. It's what we send to the IRS every year. You should be able to recite it. Probably should be anywhere from 10 to 20 words. The vision statement is optional. We want to be the driving force for business in our community, what you aspire to be. And then this board was wise enough to say, you know, we only have 4 areas, the goals that we need to focus on. So when a business says, what do you do for me, or a realtor in this case, we advocate for you, we elevate the profession, we engage with you, and we promote the realtor brand. And then the board was equally as wise and said, let's make this a 4x3. We'll have 4 goals and 3 strategies each. Now, the next thing is they laminate it, because Martha Stewart said to laminate it. And it's always on the board table. And when someone says, I've got a good idea, the chair can look at this and go, well, where does it fit in our strategic plan? So we're bringing this big picture from what's governance right down to what's in our strategy and are we strategic? I wanted to share with you from my state in Tallahassee. This is the Florida Chamber of Commerce. And a lot of chambers call their goals pillars. So you may have 3 or 4 or 5 pillars of the Chamber of Commerce. Rachel, what do you call your goals?
I just wrote this down to ask this question, actually, because we just did our mission, vision, and values last year. And can my values basically be the jumping off point for our strategic plan goals?
They could.
Okay.
But sometimes values are values like this. These are values of a board, community leadership, celebration. Or sometimes the board says, well, our values are advocacy and education. So it kind of depends what are they behavioral values? Are they the values of the chamber that should be the pillars of the chamber?
Okay.
Okay. So I wanted to share this model with you because you saw how the goals could be called goals and put into the framework, or as a chamber, you could call them pillars. What are the pillars of your chamber? And someone like the mayor may say, well, you know, I really agree with the chamber, or I like the fact that it's on your website. I know exactly what you do. The city does economic development, or you do economic development or tourism. So you could see where the 6 columns or the 4 or 5 columns are for your chamber. I also call this the Parthenon model. So the Parthenon in Greece fits very similar. So what I would put in the, can I do this? What I would put up here, here's our mission of the chamber. What I would put here, here's the 5 goals or the 4 goals, fill the pillars of the organization. What I would put down here is we want to be a dynamic, strong chamber of commerce, our infrastructure. We've got great resources. We've got great board of directors. We've got great staff. We've got great office building. So I'm designing it like a Parthenon, if that helps you at all. Because I have great respect for the Florida Chamber. I'm working with all 50 state chambers, and we're looking at what are the goals. And so I love what they've done at the Florida Chamber. So failure is not an option. I want to answer questions. I don't want to hear from anyone that Houston, we have a problem.
I have people that are that came up in the chat box before we get to everyone.
Okay, let's see.
How many years should records or minutes be kept?
You know, the IRS has asked all of you, do you have a record retention schedule? And hopefully you've said, yes, we do. And the best way to ask that is to ask your CPA and your attorney, how long should we keep our records? And then adopt that as a policy in your policy manual to pass on to future boards and to the staff. But in cases, I'm going to say that 7 years is what we're going to keep in case we're audited. There are some things that you want to throw away because of liability, or you want to shred because you've got someone's credit card number. Other things you want to keep 3 years, other things 7 years. And someone asked about minutes perpetually. Tom, is that fair to say go to your attorney for a record retention schedule and a CPA?
Absolutely. Yep, good advice.
Okay, super.
We actually
We
have,
should travel together. I'm working with the Minnesota Soybean Association next week.
Hook me up. I'm in.
I like it. I like it. We actually have a document retention and destruction policy.
Good.
Actually listed on, you know, those that are NOAC chambers. We have that listed in our resource page on our website.
Make sure it is state-based. You don't want to get one from Florida because that's going to be a little different than Ohio.
Yeah. One thing, and this is a Rachel question. You asked the question, Rachel, about board meetings being off, you know, different times.
Yeah, I liked what you said last week when we met with you last week about splitting up the executive committee meetings and the board meetings and basically doing like a board on even months and exec on odd months.
Yeah.
When the exec committee meets, what should they be focusing on their agenda to avoid looking like they're making decisions for the entire board?
Yeah, Rachel, that's
The
such a
board
good
meeting.
point. How offensive it is to have, let's say the board meets 12 times and then the executive committee meets the week before or the hour before, and all the decisions have been made. And then the board's going, why do you need me? So I would like to, and I think your minutes probably say that the executive committee may be called when there's an issue that's urgent. So the mayor's office has said, we really need a position on this, or we've got an issue, we've got to put the fire out. So I want to use the executive committee in the off months if there's an issue. If there's not an issue, they don't need to meet. Or maybe they feel better meeting. And then I would use the full board in the off months, so every other month. I'm trying to save you time. I want the staff to be focused on outreach, on strategy. Remember, it's 200 hours of staff time if you are asking the board to meet monthly and preparing. And you know, back at the office, the staff is wondering, gee, I wonder what the board is doing and what they're changing. I think that you can meet quarterly or every other month. And just ask yourself, can we design an agenda that's at least good for 60 days? Do we really only know, are we really only able to design agenda for 30 days? And you can. I feel good about that. Rachel,
So like, I'm sorry, Bob, go ahead.
did that help you at all?
Yeah, I just have like a quick follow-up to that. So my board, the week before my board meeting, I have meetings with the executive committee and finance committee. Should I do the same thing with finance committee because they look over everything before I present it to the board, or should they still have that like pre-game meeting to go over the financials before the board meeting?
You know, I have a lot of confidence in both you as the executive director and the treasurer. And I don't know I need the finance committee to meet monthly other than you've done it that way forever.
Okay.
So I want them to write the budget. I want them to convene if we have an issue, maybe pandemic rewriting the budget, or we lost a big sponsor, what are we gonna do? But to suggest that they meet monthly, that's a lot of valuable volunteer time and staff time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Cindy.
That's all the questions that I had that were in the chat. So I don't know if anybody wanted to open it up and talk. I actually was, I was just digging through some stuff. I found my in the weeds.
Good.
I always keep this.
But I just noticed, hold it up again. I just noticed what kind of weed that was.
Oh, it's not.
I don't know.
It's not, I'm like, no, it's
Okay.
not that.
You know, when I would say we're in the weeds and I'm in Colorado, they're going, yeah, what's up? What?
Wrong kind of weed.
But I have,
Betty.
and I've actually seen this being passed around the board table where the chairman says to a different board member, hey, would you be responsible for the weed sign at this meeting? So we've got board members who kind of get socialized to, okay, let's keep this pretty high up there. Remember the altimeter is 50,000 feet. When the board starts getting down, the chair needs to say, hey, let's get back to what's our mission? What's our goals? Let's get where we need to be.
I like it. I know there was a suggestion. Oh, go ahead, Betty.
Betty?
I was just wondering, when bringing aboard a new board member, does the executive director host an interview separately from the executive committee?
Boy, that's a political hot potato, Betty. You do an interview. What if you said, you know, I don't like them? So I'd be really cautious about that. That is the role of the nominating committee, or what I would leadership development committee. The executive director receives that person, but I wouldn't want to be in a position where, oh, Betty, you interview them. Your relationship is to the staff. The chair and the nominating committee is responsible for the new board members' competency, training, and then it'll come together when you do a board orientation.
Okay, so they're responsible for the board orientation. I'm a new chamber exec, 4 months now, so.
Bless you. The board orientation is usually done by a combination of the chamber president and the chamber chair. It's also better done if it's done by someone else from the chamber next door. I'm looking at John. I know with his experience, you could say, John, could you come in and do a 90-minute board orientation for us? It always helps when you're orienting the board and the person's from a different time zone or a different zip code. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, 60 to 90 minutes is the orientation.
Hey, Bob, can you talked a little bit about it. Can you go through again when and when not to have a board meeting, A, without the executive director, and B, do you have a board meeting for what, and not tell the executive director that we're meeting?
You know, if we have a problem, if the board says we're going to meet and we've left the executive director out, let's use the word partner, and it's a leadership team, and the board governs and the staff manages. So if the board selects to leave out half of the leadership team, there's a problem there. So, and we talked about protecting, but this is a leadership team and it's built on trust. Karen, the best book I can leave on the board table is called The Speed of Trust. And if there was any reason that there's not trust, it's going to damage the results of the board meetings. So I've got to have trust. And for a chair to say I might go into executive session without my CEO, this is the CEO of a corporation. You wouldn't expect them to go into without. So I'd be very cautious with that, Karen. Board could go into executive session for the 3 reasons: CEO performance review, very confidential contract, very confidential member grievance. But I wouldn't expect the board to be meeting without the CEO in the room at all. I like the behind you on your right shoulder.
Thank you.
Is that your strategic plan?
No, it's involved in there, but it's
Yeah.
everything that we presented. We took it to our members. It all
Yeah.
has to be changed now, but
Yeah, I like it. It looks like the mission there.
thank you.
Craig, any questions?
I have one more that came in on the
Okay.
chat.
Craig, are you
If Greg doesn't have
outside?
any.
Are you outside, Craig?
I am. You might as well take advantage of this.
Nice, smart. Cindy.
All right, so from Andrew, tips on creating buy-in on some of these strategies.
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
One, blame it on Bob. Bob said. Don't do it all at once. You know, let's go with the consent agenda first, and then let's talk with the chair about crafting an agenda that works better for us. And board members are sometimes reluctant to do strategic plan because they're scared that they start with a group hug, and then you have a trust fall in a game. But if you say, and what did I say? You could do a strategic plan in 5 hours. If you do the homework in advance. And I wrote an article this week that says, if I can read your budget, I know what's in your strategic plan. So I can look at your committees, your budget, and pretty much, you know, without getting to the meeting where people want to throw pasta on the wall and see what sticks. And we're not changing the direction of the organization. If you already had those 4 core pillars in Rachel, your values of whatever those 5 or 6 are, the next time we get together in 2 years or 3 years, they're probably going to stay the same. The only time I would say the board can start thinking short term is in 2021. We need it for pandemic recovery and rebound. If you're still promoting COVID-19 on your website, I would change that terminology to recovery and rebound. And that we're here for you, and the board can think short term, what are we doing? How are we going to help businesses that are suffering? What events are we going to have? But then I expect the board to think 2022 and to 2025. If you do a strategic plan right now, I would call it Vision 2025. That we've got a plan, we've got the leadership, and we can communicate what we're doing. And it takes 2 or 3 years. If you want a new exit ramp in your highway, or you want a new office building, you've got to think through 23, 24, 25. Betty, you can ask me questions anytime you want, email or otherwise. Cindy, anything else? I'm looking at the time.
Yeah, I'm looking at the time too. I don't have anything else. Let me do real quick, just share a couple of slides here real quick before we have folks that need to go. See if I can get this to come up here. Hopefully everybody can see it. So we actually, coming up, oh, yep. I'm so great at this. All right. Upcoming events. I know that this series has just been so great. I've been super excited about this series. Coming up May 13th, we are going to have Cami Welch. And Cami Welch, for those that don't know her, she's actually the president of the Arvada Chamber out of Colorado. She's going to be talking about better member retention through rethinking your engagement. So it's going to be really great. And then June 10th, we're going to do an session on marketing and communication strategies. So be looking for those. And we just really want to thank Bob so much. I know we could probably talk for like 3 more hours because this is so great. I took so many notes, and I've actually heard this a few times. But we have been doing some orientation boards as well. And I take this information that has been shared by Bob, and I take these to the chamber. So if you are looking to have an orientation done, and maybe Bob isn't available to come and do that for you, we can certainly help you with that as well.
Okay.
So the recording, if anybody else has any questions,